Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tyler Seed. I'm just going to run through a couple technical considerations before we get started here. You should see a technical consideration slide on your screen right now, and you should be hearing me talking about it. You've got two audio options. You can dial in with the number provided there, or you can use a headset. If you've got any questions, anything's going wrong, or any tech support issues, you can type them into the chat box or email me at that email address, tseed@naturalstep.ca. And if you have any questions throughout the entire presentation, you can type them into the chat box and we'll save them for a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So right now, if you can see and hear me, you should be able to find a raise hand button. So if you can see and hear me, please use that raise hand button and raise your hand. And I see some hands going up. That's good. That's good. So with that, we'll get started, and I will hand things off to our presenters today, Chad Park and Sarah Lynn Hodgkin.
Thanks, Tyler. Hi, everybody. Tyler, you can hear me, yeah?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Sarah Lynn here. Tyler, you sound so official, almost like a airline pilot or somebody over the speakers. That's what it reminds me of. Thanks for getting us all coordinated. So Chad's on the line with me as well, and today we're focused on getting to results with sustainability transition labs, as the webinar said. And the two people who are focused today, of course, is myself, Sarah Lynn. I'm the Director of Collaboration Programs and Evaluation at the Natural Step. I'm here in Ottawa on a bright blue sunny day, gorgeous. And then Chad is also on the line with me. Many of you have probably read his blogs and his articles in the newsletters and stuff, and he's the Executive Director of the Natural Step, and he's over in Wakefield, Quebec with us. And of course, you guys have all heard Tyler's lovely voice trying to get us coordinated and started. Thanks again, Tyler. So as it said in the write-up, the purpose of today is really to talk about what is this thing that we keep talking about called Sustainability Transition Labs. What are the approaches underpinning these STLs, or Sustainability Transition Lab program? What is it? What are the activities that are leading us to impact? And focusing on diving into some of our process and being able to see how we're using projects as clear examples to what we're learning, and we'll dive into that today. So it's really about rolling up our sleeves and asking what are these things, and are they and how are they leading us to impact. So in terms of questions and stuff, like Tyler said, track them in the chat box, and then at the end what we'll do is we'll have hopefully oodles of time to dive into those questions, because that's really where I'll be able to understand what you're interested in and where we're going, because we're giving pretty high-level stuff here today. So understanding that that's the purpose, let's dive into what a Sustainability Transition Lab is. And as you can see on your screen, that slide is one that we typically use as a definition of a Sustainability Transition Lab. Multi-stakeholder approach, tackling complex social and environmental challenges, sustainability challenges, and specifically that these wicked challenges that no one party can address on its own. So we're looking at the root barriers in the system, trying to involve and facilitate these diverse stakeholders, finding shared value to address these barriers in order to get to those tangible breakthrough results to shift that system towards sustainability. And we're trying to co-design and co-deliver that with strategic partners of whatever system it is that we're looking at, because this is about systems change. With that definition, many of you probably went to our website before this webinar, and you'll have seen this visual about, why did we call it a Sustainability Transition Lab, as it says, what's in a name? And this is where my elevator pitch comes in when people say, well, what is it that you do? What is this thing you refer to called the STL? And the nuts and bolts of it is using a lab-like approach to enable a transition to a sustainable society. Sustainability being the shared goal, transition being a recognition that systems change is required to transition to that sustainability, that shared goal, and lab implying learning, experimentation, breakthrough. So that Sustainability Transition Lab process is intended to build the capacity of a group of those diverse stakeholders to tackle that wicked sustainability challenge, to create those breakthrough solutions within that system. We want to innovate differently, right? And so the projects underneath this program bring the natural steps expertise in a field that is quite diverse and is making a lot of change in the world. And it's about facilitating transformational change towards sustainability with leading approaches to multi-stakeholder collaboration. And guys, to be very honest, a lot of this right now is supported by the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. And it's about the support of the natural step playing out a bet or a hypothesis that sustainability, real, true strategic sustainability, has a place to play in this lab field, hence evolving into the Sustainability Transition Lab program. So if we're trying to take wicked problems and we're trying to transition them into wicked opportunities, right? How do we do that, and what's the key question to doing that? Chad, how about if this is a good time for you to jump in and maybe talk through that a little bit? I'm realizing that your jump in hasn't even happened yet. Yeah?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so as Sarah Lynn mentions, we're talking about innovation here, and innovation is about finding new ways to do things or new opportunities and new ideas. And so, I mean, fundamentally, I guess a key thing involved in that is the lens that we look at these issues with. So a lot of sustainability issues are framed as problems, and they are, of course. But we also are really conscious of the fact that they're inherent in complexity is a whole set of new opportunities as well. So it's very easy to be bogged down by the complexity of the issues involved, often in sustainability issues, and also to get bogged down by the whole notion of having to collaborate or work with organizations that we're not used to working with. So a sustainability transition lab is really also about embracing that complexity and working with it and trying to identify opportunities that arise from complexity and from new configurations and new kinds of relationships. So I think we can flip to the next slide, Sarah Lynn. And one thing I'll just say is the Natural Step has been developing the Sustainability Transition Lab process and program over the last couple of years. And part of the impetus for doing that was a recognition that while our organization and others had a fair bit of success enabling change, sustainability-driven change, mostly within organizations, so organizational change in terms of strategy and direction and vision and so on, that despite the fact that there were more and more examples of good examples of role models and organizations taking a leadership role, our systems are still not changing nearly fast enough. And a big reason for that is, of course, because they are complex and because no single organization can address most of these challenges. So that was the impetus for us to develop and then launch the Sustainability Transition Lab program. And what we wanted to do was to take lessons that the Natural Step has learned over the years in transformative change, mostly in organizations and communities, and apply them in the context of multi-stakeholder collaboration, or at least see which of them can be applicable. So here's a few of those key lessons learned that we kind of bring as part of our experience to the development and the framing and the design of Sustainability Transition Lab. The first is a focus on value creation, and in organizations that's of course very key. If we're talking about businesses or municipal governments and so on, that the idea of framing sustainability as a driver of value and a driver of business value is really fundamental. And those of you who know Bob Willard's work on the business case for sustainability will know that that's always an important prompt, I guess, and necessary framing for any kind of organizational change that's driven by sustainability. And in the multi-stakeholder collaborative context, it's also important and additionally complex, because you've got multiple organizations who all have to derive some kind of value from a participative process or a collaborative process, and sometimes those interests, of course, don't align, and sometimes it might be that solving the systemic issue is understandable and valuable from the sense of the community or the society, but what the individual organization gets out of participation or out of the solution is, also requires attention. So that's a big part of what needs to shape the design of a process. Is that individual? Not only are we talking about the change we want to affect in the system overall, but also paying very, very close attention and being very explicit and deliberate about what organizations stand to gain by seeing those issues resolved, because that's going to keep everyone at the table long enough to work through the process. The second one, about using vision as a driving force, and again, I think in a way, those of you who are familiar with the natural step will know that this is pretty fundamental to our approach, and to most change approaches, I think. And the complexity of it, of course, is when we're working in contexts where there's a whole range, a few dozen maybe, stakeholders and organizations, it can be really, really challenging to create a meaningful shared vision. And I remember seeing a talk by Hal Hamilton, who is the leader of the Sustainable Food Lab in the United States. He said that basically we don't believe in a common vision for these kind of processes. That Oxfam and Walmart, for example, will never share the same vision. And he was suggesting that getting to a shared vision that's detailed enough to actually provide direction can risk consuming a great deal of time, and also you can end up with something that's so generic that it doesn't really provide meaningful direction. So that's kind of the challenge of this in a multi-stakeholder context, and this is where some of the natural steps expertise and experience, I guess, in using principles to drive change processes can be really useful. And that means we don't necessarily need to all agree on a specific vision of the future as a group, although we can shape a shared sense of direction, but we can also use principles that are sometimes easier to get groups to agree on, principles of success. Another point is the one about simplicity without reduction, and this kind of gets to the idea that these are super complex processes and issues and so on, and again, often we can get lost in the complexity. And for all of us, as we're trying to navigate that, the important thing is to be able to have some capacity to recognize patterns and to handle the complexity. So not pretend it doesn't exist, but to use, for example, use principles and other frameworks and so on to help recognize patterns and understand what's actually happening. So simplicity in the sense of being clear and simple about diagnosing problems or articulating solutions and so on, but also without reduction, as in not trying to just immediately break a system down into its parts and start working on the parts, because that ends up, with siloed kind of approaches. So that's part of the challenge, and some of our lessons from organizations apply in that context. The last two are really about how a process like this unfolds, and one is about the importance of authentic leadership. and of course, we all have experience in organizations about the integral role that leaders play and leadership plays at all levels in terms of making something happen. And the same is also true in multi-stakeholder collaboration. And we're talking about framing a narrative, issuing a call to collaborate in the first place, and framing a narrative that is inclusive enough that people can see that their voice will be heard and is needed actually to solve the problem. And that takes a particular kind of leadership. And so the last one is about designing good process, and we probably don't need to spend too much time there because we're going to spend more time on that for the forthcoming slides. I think it's just about what exactly is a good process for getting people to understand a system, imagine different possibilities, and identify collaborative opportunities in a way that makes them feel that they are deriving value from being a part of it. So, Serlin, I'll pass it back to you, I think, to go through some of the concepts and approaches in the lab.
Sure. Thanks, Chad. With all of that said, and that being our context piece, everybody, it then became an effort of blending these concepts and approaches that really underpin the Sustainability Transition Labs. And you probably saw some of this on our website. But some of that work is, as many of you know, around the natural step. We use a framework for strategic sustainable development. But also underpinning this is Theory U. And again, I'm not sure how many of you know about Theory U, but you can Google it as we're talking. Developmental evaluation, which is an evaluative measure that helps us learn and adapt to what's emerging on the fly, doing rapid proto-testing to get real-time feedback to be able to choose whether to go left or right or understand why this happened and not that, whatever it might be. Being able to have the concept of change labs, which if you know about the lab field, I mean, this is what we're talking about, is being able to bring these things together, as well as partnership brokering. Again, another term you can Google, partnership brokering being intentionally managing the partnership process rather than just managing a bunch of activities to provide genuine equity among what can be unequal relationships, and basically to make it your business to support that partnering process of seeing shared ownership, co-creation of activities, that type of work. It's the investment in the partnering process, because obviously this is about collaboration and this is a key tool to do that. And then many of you might know the approach of collective impact. Being able, the whole point of the Sustainability Transition Labs is to be using a process, which we'll get into in a second, to come together to collectively make an impact to shift the system. So I'm not going to spend too much time diving into each of these concepts and approaches. Again, if you want to ask a question about any of these, then we can dive into those, or you guys can be Googling while I'm talking. But those are the underpinnings of what the Sustainability Transition Lab process is. Chad, there's nothing you wanted to add there, eh? Like, that's pretty good.
Sorry, no, that's great.
Yeah, okay, great. So then, in all, what we're doing is we're trying to reach a set of desired outcomes with the Sustainability Transition Labs, right? And what we've written down, or what our hope is that we're using this process to get to breakthrough results, which we're kind of calling the splash. These can be either changes in new public policy or resource flows, new programs, standards, game-changing systems-level shifts, where you see the housing system, the energy, whatever system it is, that you see a breakthrough result in the shift of a relationship, whatever that might be. But that splash or that breakthrough result will also have rippling effects, right? So desired outcomes can also be ripples of a long-term commitment to system-level collaboration, an increased capacity around sustainability literacy, an outcome of being able to actually hold a similar vision, at least at a principle level of sustainability within that system. Or one of the ripple effects that we're even betting on is possibly by collaborating, you can actually feel a renewed sense of hope that this system can become aligned with sustainability principles, or that you're at least interconnected with partners you haven't been partnered with before. If we see those breakthrough results, it's not that, I should be clear, it's not that we have to see each and every one, but it's being able to use this process to start to see those types of results and see them in a compelling way to build that collective and shared value, and to be able to see those things that Chad has been talking about, all while trying to see this change that we have, seeing that change endure over time, right? I'll leave that there for now. With these outcomes, what is the process by which we're trying to get at? So we understand where we've come from, how we've created these sustainable transition labs, what the underpinnings of them are, and what the outcome we're trying to get at. And the slide that I'm showing you up here is basically the process that we're trying to use. And this is about 4 stages of the game. The first stage being the pre-lab stage, which is getting ready. It's all of that stuff that we're trying to bring a big voice to, whether it's project planning and partnership brokering and getting the pieces of collaboration in place, the pieces of trying to steward this project, trying to have a shared narrative, have a co-created budget, which I'm sure you would all have a little giggle over trying to do that with a bunch of co-conveners and collaborators. It's about establishing rules, those fundamental foundational pieces. That's what the pre-lab stage is all about. And there's a lot of lessons and impact that we've made just in that stage, which has been fascinating. And then it's being able to transition through a bridge into that phase 1, and that's when we start bringing participants on board, asking the question of why are we coming together to shift this system, and exploring that shared value that Chad was alluding to. So what value can we attain by working together, i.e. not working in our silos, right, but working together to shift this system? And the practices involved in that are as micro as crafting the right language around an invitation of bringing someone in, to using an interview process with 30 to 50 people in that system as a way not just to collect information, but to start to hear what people's fears are and what their hopes are, as well as trying to understand from their differing perspectives what is this current reality of a system we're seeing. It means mapping those initiatives, having a foundational workshop of bringing people together and building that shared language about the issue, the narrative, the problems, the possibilities of sustainability all along the way. The outcome of that, of course, is to get those clarified key goals of that span that shared value and that recognize that shared value over these groups that are trying to shift the system, as well as not only over the whole group, but individually. This can't be something that I'm just doing over here on the side of my desk. It provides value for the stuff that I'm working on, that I'm doing. Phase 2 then transitions in. This is where, for those of you who know theory U kind of stuff, like this is where we start to set up the pillars and start to get it down at the bottom of that U, right? Where we start to be able to say, how are we going to do this? And you're starting to shift and open up and transform those relationships, those insights, that will to act amongst people. You're just opening those hearts, minds, and wills just that little bit more so that they can presence together to be able to say, okay, what are the priorities we're going to work at? What are the leverage points in the system that we're going to pull at, right? And we shove in all the Danella Meadows information about systems level change in here, right? About leverage points and the like. And the tactical activities is about having what we call learning journeys, which I can go into if you like, but it's also about mapping the system in a way in service of identifying those leverage points, backcasting from a shared sense of success, the sustainable, science-based, rigorously defined sustainability principles, using those as your shared sense of success and backcasting from there and having the creative tension of our current reality to that vision that we're defining, at least at a principle level. Again, not necessarily a shared vision, as you know, as Chad was saying, between Hal Hamilton and WWF or whatever it might be. But it's all in terms of getting to the goal of being able to work differently, to prioritize initiatives that will help shift that system, because the things that we've been doing just haven't worked either in our silos or even in our attempts to collaborate. So we're trying to identify those prioritized collaborative initiatives to then, in phase 3, collectively make an impact to those collaborative initiatives. to implement those things. And then, you know, interject your collective impact theory here, guys, where it's about implementing a portfolio of mutually aligned activities to be able to reach those collective impact measures, right, to shift that system. So you need a backbone organization, you need shared measurements, all of that great stuff to be able to get to those breakthrough results because of this different type of process that you've gone through, which has been able to transform the way that people participating even see the system or their commitment to act or the relationships amongst them. So I'm going to stop there about the process and really get into what are the activities leading us to impact. And Chad and I have rolled this up into sort of 4 main themes. So the activities leading us into impact focus on not so much, you know, okay, we've put this many solar panels on a building, or, you know, here are the definition of these types of activities, but instead it's rolling these up to seeing the impact that the practice of our work is setting us to set the conditions to shift people's insights and relationships and will to act, which is beyond the excellent project management and stewardship skills you need to have, of course, but it's focused on the doing of certain activities, right, getting down to doing this and this and this, but also the way that you be differently within this transition and within trying to make an impact. So anyways, we've rolled that up into these 4 different things, and the first thing is around design. And it's about having really great or strong design, and Chad was alluding to that earlier. And design meaning designing a process that allows people to transform their relationships with one another, as you've heard me say already, transform their insights of the system and of one another and of themselves, and being able to transform their will to act collaboratively, collectively, with their will to act in terms of not just having another task list to do, because we're all great at having those task lists, but also of being a bit differently within that system, connecting differently within that system. And it's about using things like Theory U to be in partnership brokering to and different collaborative models to be able to shift human beings, guys, to be able to make those policy changes, right? To get those solar panels up on a roof, or whatever the breakthrough activities results are through the collective activities that we've collectively identified and prioritized. So it's about having great design to do that. It's also based on having 25 years, which the Natural Stuff has had, of building learningful experiences. That again, it's not just collectively coming up with a notepad of your to-do list, but being able to have these interventions that are learningful, which means that in your process, whether it's conducting an interview, hosting a workshop, whatever it might be, that those things are learningful and to at least some degree somewhat transformative, to be able to take an initial engagement and to some small degree get people to open up in terms of their trust, in terms of their understanding of how to work together, or even just to work together. Their small degree of transformation and their insights of the system, and being able to see that from their perspective, but from the person beside them that maybe they haven't been able to see from that perspective before. And being able to do that, guys, the bet is that allows people to see the system differently, which then allows them to see solutions differently, right? And that is all based on creating these learningful, hopefully to some degree transformational experiences at the individual level, at the group level, at the systems level. And then, of course, and Chad, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but it's about designing in a way that allows people to learn or to really, work their muscle around thinking from a systems place, right? That systems thinking, that Senge stuff, that we all know and love, about being able to truly backcast from a place and beginning with that end in mind, being able to use instead of lofty or untangible definitions of sustainability, or all these different versions of it, being able to use a science-based definition of sustainability, as well as being able to position that, you'll see the diagram on here, in a way that provides a framework to make sense of everything that is going on, whether it's at the systems level, defining the success level, using the sustainability principles there, at the strategy level, actions level, or different tools level. Chad, before I move on, did you want to riff on that a little bit, or should we leave that to question and answer because I'm seeing that it's already 12:30?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Sure. So then the other way is through, obviously, our practice of this. So the practice is is within these bullet points and more, right? 'Cause I could seriously talk about this. I get pretty energetic about this, guys, as you probably may have noticed. But the practice is in being differently as practitioners ourselves and as in participants in processes like this, in being a bit different here. So what do I mean by that? I mean about using things like developmental evaluation, otherwise known as learning and adapting to what emerges, that first bullet point on your screen, guys. So the practice here, like to get into the minutia of the practice, it's about starting from an appreciative inquiry place, a learning place versus a judgmental place, crisis place. Why didn't you do that place? And said, oh, interesting, I can't believe, like, oh, that's interesting, experimentation place. Oh, that didn't pay off, did it? Well, why not? Well, let's figure that out. And really evaluating to what is developing in real time to be able to respond to that on the fly and to be able to legitimize what's happening with the group, to be able to respond to that as a group. So the minutia of that practice can be as simple as writing reflection diaries every week, which is something that I practice, guys. It's a reflection exercise to be able to sense make what's going on in this, because it gets pretty complex, as you guys, when you roll up your sleeves, you know that, right? But it's also asking questions. It's using some DE, developmental evaluation, DE tools along the way. Stuff as simple as using a tool of asking the question, what, so what, now what? What's going on, so why does it matter, and what do we do with it now? What, so what, now what? Or using a tool like a user profile. Say, okay, guys, who are the users of evaluative information that care about this stuff, and so what do we want to produce for them so that they can make real-time decisions? Is it the innovators? Is it the field? Is it your board of directors? Is it your constituents? Is it the participants? And then being able to feed everything through a user profile, a profile of people who are using information that makes it relevant. Again, another DE tool, of which I can riff on this for a long time, guys. Or being able to ask, like these things are deep, so I know I'm just gliding over the surface. But then also tools about asking yourself, you're standing in a space and you're confused and you say, okay, so for who am I doing this, in what context and why? For who does this work for, whatever it is, in what context and why? And being able to use tools like that to be able to reflect and truly staying in that learning and adapting space. So that's one way in our practice that leads us to say, okay, this is leading us to impact. We're not doing this just to twiddle our thumbs and say, oh, isn't it nice to reflect? We're doing this to say, hey, this is leading us towards outcomes because we're making wise decisions on the fly to learn what is emerging and adapting to that learning, all with the compass point at the end or the lighthouse at the end of those breakthrough results. What is useful now for us to do to get to that result? Collaborating for a collective impact, right? So collaborating is a term, and Chad, I think you even say this in your blog. It's been used in many different contexts and almost is threatened to be used as this lofty term, right? But collaborating is a skill. It is an intentional practice. And collaborating is damn hard. And being able to do that, to collectively make an impact, takes great practice. I'm going to skim over this, guys, because I'm going to rely on your questions because I'm realizing it's 12:35, because I can go pretty deep in all of this, right? Placing the issue at the center is another practice where instead of it's TNS or NRCan or World Wildlife Fund or whatever it might be, you need to, instead of placing your organization or yourself at the center, you're placing the issue at the center, shifting the housing system, shifting the energy system, trying to make a dent on climate change. Whatever the issue is at the center, having that practice in everything you do. Holding to your bet about what this lab is going to achieve. The natural step in all of our projects under the Sustainability Transition Lab program holds on to our hypothesis that sustainability-driven collaboration is an intentional value in the lab space, and we're constantly trying to make sure that we're placing that bet and that we can shift the systems in which we're playing in, right? So you have bets along the way, like that's a pretty big bet, right? But then you also have small bets along the way, and always being able to hold yourself to those bets, not that you need them to play out, but being able to learn from them. And then, of course, being able to have the traits and the skills to be able to do this. And that's not something that I'm seeing a lot in a lot of literature of people talking about. So being able to have the character of trust, integrity, selfless behavior, absorbing without defensiveness, being able to interpret things, trial and error, allow for innovation, and so on. Part of this is also with our Sustainability Transition Lab tribe. We've created a tribe internally that is helping us practice these traits and that allows us to connect with experts in process design, facilitation, dialogue education, systems mapping, research, communications, all the different types of things that allow us to practice. That leads us to building the field, which is the next one, guys, in terms of activities that are leading us to impact, is that it is about constantly, for us, building the field of labs. There's a plurality of labs out there. There's a lot of different ways to do labs, design labs, social innovation labs, all second-generation types of labs, and it's about being able to contribute to that field, to learn with one another, and being able to engage in a way that allows us to do that. It allows us to do that also in tangible ways by using our projects, which I'll jump to in a second, and building a field book of our own practice so we can reflect on that. And of course, it's with the interventions that we're doing, and that's what this slide is talking about. The way that we're making impact is not just about the practice or the field building or the design, but it's actually obviously the interventions, which many of you are curious about. And it's about being able to use our projects with these interventions to make those activities happen. So in terms of learning from the Sustainability Transition Lab projects themselves, the interventions that we're doing amongst each one, and I've put the websites here in case you want to go and take a look at the projects I'm talking about. But being able to map these against the process diagram that I had put up before, the activities here, I'll just give you examples of ones, and then we can ask questions about them if you want to. But an example here is with our gold standard benchmark project. I mean, you'll see just in this title, I say AKA Future Fit Business Benchmark. Well, just in that alone, it's been an interesting activity to learn and adapt to what we're seeing in the field of how people are resonating or how our thought in crafting the narrative along our process, right? Scoping the boundaries and scoping the issue or the challenge has led us to this whole rebranding of what it means, and even has gone so far as to say, wow, we really need to put this issue at the center, which I talked about as one of our activities to impact, right? That we're putting the issue so much at the center that we're moving away from having towards a gold standard benchmark for sustainable business on the Natural Step website, everyone. And instead we have this website, futurefitbusiness.org, because we're saying this is an issue all on its own. And it doesn't belong to any of the collaborators making this happen or the co-conveners making this happen. It is the issue at the center. And it goes right down to, so who hosts this website? Well, it hosts its own website in this situation. Some other things here, guys, is during the pre-lab, I mean, there have been huge, in terms of interventions and activities, there have been huge lessons here of, and I know this sounds so simple, but having your fundamentals around project management in place and rules and responsibilities. We've used something called Rapids. We all use different project management styles. But it's amazing how in complexity and trying to deal with all this stuff, those basic tools are so like they evolve themselves. And then it's about being able to, again, in your Housing Action Lab, being able to use things like collaboration agreements to really be able to riff on how do we collaborate well, right? And for those of you who have taken a partnership brokering course, again, you can Google Partnership Brokers Association. You can look at, so how do you take a collaboration agreement to figure out how do we work well together? Right? That's something we've done in our housing work, right? And we can be able to use that as a tool along the way to look at and manage and measure the health of our collaboration, because if we, as co-conveners, for example, the Natural Step and Evergreen, if we don't have a healthy collaboration, if there's too much tension, we're not agreeing with the left and right turns, if we don't have the right funding guidelines, whatever it might be, if we don't have something like a collaboration agreement to help us with the health of the way we work together, then we can get off kilter and then no work gets done. Because it's, again, a lot of this is rooted in sustainability-driven collaboration. and then it can get into things like I was mentioning before, like the interviews. So if you're doing deep dialogue interviews to be able to sense the system, it is more than just conducting an interview. It is about sense-making where people are at, their perceptions, their hopes, their fears, the intentionality of being able to use those interviews to bring people along, to learn about the system yourself, to be able to create a culture of trusting and safeness and down to action and wanting to get to those spaces, right? Guys, and I'm just noticing the time as well, being 20 to 1. There's so much that I can say here, but I really feel like being able to get into your questions is probably a better use of our time. So Chad, instead of me diving into all of this and guessing what people are interested in the projects, I'm going to hand it over to you to maybe go through this slide at a light touch and wrap us off so we can get into the questions. Are you good with that, Chad?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks,
okay.
Carolyn. So yeah, this is the second last slide. I think it's basically just saying, you know, our experience so far about where is a sustainability transition lab particularly helpful or useful, and that kind of gets at the point that Sarah-Lynn has mentioned earlier about there's a range of different approaches, even in the lab field, in the social lab field. So. You know, these points are just an initial articulation and reflections from ourselves and our experience so far about when is this particular process helpful. So if there's an absence of a shared vision of success amongst the multi-stakeholder group and or an absence of clear policy direction on the issue, then the Sustainability Transition Lab can be quite helpful. If there's a need for alignment and amplification of existing initiatives. So it might be an issue that has a lot of activity already happening on it, even a lot of multi-stakeholder work happening on it, but there's a sense that there's a need to kind of align those various efforts and to amplify some of them. So another one is if there's a multi-stakeholder group that is struggling with handling trade-offs in decision-making. So, for example, in balancing or trying to navigate the trade-offs involved of environmental or social or economic considerations of particular solutions or particular ways forward. So this kind of speaks a little bit to some of the natural steps backcasting approach that is kind of baked into the Sustainability Transition Lab, because it's really designed to help groups to handle trade-offs and to sort of plan from a basis of success instead of being always caught constantly weighing the pros and cons of every issue in a way that feels like you're always dealing with trade-offs. Of course, if there's a need for a shared language about sustainability or about the issue and a shared mental model, and if there's a desire to really drive innovation efforts and design solutions with a sustainability lens. That last bit isn't added in the bullet point, but you know, the innovation and the design to be really inspired by sustainability principles. And the last one is just there are particular issues where it's hard to get a group of collaborators together. And our early experience so far has been that there are certain instances where the framing of an issue using the framing of transition can be really helpful in helping get uncommon collaborators to the table. So this transition kind of implies a sort of respect and honor and acknowledgement of where we are today, in addition to a recognition that there's a need for a change to a future state. And that kind of ethic is baked into the Sustainability Transition Lab, and I think there are particular issues that where that kind of framing can be useful. So the next slide is the last one, other than the thank you slide. So this is just to let you all know that we're holding, the Natural Steps holding its second annual Accelerate conference. The theme is collaborating for sustainability, so it's very, very consistent, of course, with everything that we've just been talking about. And last year's event was in Guelph. This year it's in Toronto on June 5th and 6th at the Evergreen Brickworks. And we've got a fantastic 2-day agenda put together. All kind of events like this, of course, need to have inspiring presenters and speakers, and we've got plenty of those. Some of them are, gurus in systems thinking, like Peter Senge, or leaders in sustainability and clean technology, like Nick Parker, and others are from other fields who are going to relate their experiences in collaboration in those other fields to sustainability. And a good example of that is Jen Heil, the Olympic mogul skier and world champion, who also happens to be very, very involved with and interested in sustainability. So she's going to talk about the lessons of from owning the podium and how they apply to collaborating for sustainability. So great stuff, great sessions like that. But the real hallmark of this event and our event in the past, and really all the Natural Steps events, are the learning designs, in the sense that this is I think a different kind of conference in the way that the design is set up for people to engage with one another and not just be hearing and listening from experts at the front of the room. So there's all kinds of interaction and learning from one another and learning together built into the design of the conference. So yeah, we hope you'll join us, especially if you're interested in any of what's been presented already. Anything else you wanted to say on that, Sterling?
No, other than it'll be at Evergreen, I think, and which is an awesome space. And write down that discount code, TNS10, if you want a 10% discount that we're giving to webinar registrants, if anybody wants that. It'll be a cool time to share and learn together. Thanks for that, Chad. So I think that to wrap up is that there's a lot here in terms of the Sustainability Transition Lab as a program, within the projects, within why we brought why this has even blossomed, what it looks like in the field, all of that stuff. And so I think what we'll do, Tyler, if you're keen on it, is to use the last 10 minutes to answer any questions or have a conversation going about some of the things that people are picking up and where they want to take the conversation to.
Sure thing. We've got a few questions in the question box already. So what we'll try first is we will open up microphones one at a time from people who've asked questions. So Greg Seymour, you've got a question, and I'm going to try opening up your mic here. Hello, Greg. Hello, Greg. Well, Greg's mic doesn't seem to be working, so I'll just read his question for him.
Okay.
So Greg says that a fundamental obstacle to ensure industry-wide collaboration is the issue that many organizations already in the sustainability space see this as a competitive advantage. This is a fundamentally wrong approach and is prone to anti-collaboration. So how do we address this issue?
This is a competitive advantage. I'm assuming that sustainability is a competitive advantage. Chad, do you want to jump in here? I suspect you're going to talk about some great shared value stuff. Go for it.
Yeah, that's a great question and great comment.
Yeah.
And I had the same. It's sort of a dilemma, because on one hand you need to present when we're working with and in organizations, you need to present the business case and Bob Willard and so on, because there does need to be. And on the other hand, there's the point that you just made, that if they view sustainability as being all about competitive advantage, and then they might be less inclined to collaborate. So two things I'll say on that. One is just something about the conference, actually, is that there's a session that is specifically on this topic, and the speaker is Avram Lazar, who's the former head of the Forest Products Association of Canada and was instrumental in building, or, engaging that industry in working with others in formulating the boreal forest agreement and so on. He's now working in a different industry, the salmon farming industry. And so his talk is actually going to be about sort of pre-competitive collaboration in industry. So I know he's got a lot of insights, and he, really has voiced to us his view, which is similar to yours in your question, that this is really, really important for engaging business because it's key. And I guess in terms of my own response, that one thing I would say is just that it really is about what's the pain that people feel. And so, I mean, there's also what's the opportunity they might see, but is the pain significant enough at the status quo that that they really need to collaborate? And for most of these systemic challenges, people may not experience them as systemic challenges. They experience them as, I can't get my objective accomplished. And so I think the real key is in that first phase, which is all about really, really surfacing the value that might be gained in collaborating. Is to be really, really deliberate and clear about that, and to surface the, why, are you going to be able to achieve X and Y objective without collaborating, and who are you going to need to collaborate with in order to see the kind of policy change that might be required to achieve that goal, and so on. And that is also actually, by the way, why the lab is designed in a phase-by-phase process, because it's not like any of us generally automatically jump to let's say to the other side in terms of seeing value right away. So it's something that builds gradually through relationships, through new insights, and so on. So the first phase really is about making that explicit, and there are on and off ramps in a lab process. So if they don't think that the collaboration is actually going to generate any value for their organization, then they probably shouldn't be at the table. Or it's going to be hard to convince them they should be, and we kind of need to recognize and be realistic about that.
And sometimes those people are needed at the table, and then it's about having influencers to invite them, coax them, whatever it might be. And once you get them in the room and you start seeing the interaction, you can really focus on that shared value, on shared pain, those types of things. Seeing what motivates people, but there's usually fear behind motivation as well, and you got to figure that part out too. Tyler, how about we go to the next one?
Sure. So the next question comes from Rika, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. We'll try seeing if her mic is open, if his mic is open. Hello? And Rika doesn't have a mic, so I'll read their question. So Rika wonders how all the different concepts, Theory U, FSSD, etc., are merged into one overarching lab process, and what elements guide the process design?
Oh, that's a big question that we could spend lots of time on, I'm sure. So that it's interweaved throughout those phases that I put up before, Rika. I don't know if I can get to it in time, but it's interweaved throughout these different phases, right? So there's, for example, partnership brokering goes right across all of this. You're always brokering partnerships and being intentional about how collaboration works, for example, right? Being able to look at Theory U and being able to see people probably in that pre-lab into that phase 1, they're at the top of the U, and in phase 2, they're you've brought them down through different interventions, and now they're presencing down at the bottom of the U. And then near the end of phase 2 into phase 2, at the end of phase 2, they're coming up that U in terms of being able to midway to be able to create those activities, those collaborative activities, right? And again, the framework for strategic sustainable development is right throughout. It's about having it explicitly in different areas in terms of having a visioning workshop, right, and a systems workshop, or it's about having it implicitly or subtly in terms of creating a common language around sustainability, whatever it might be. So, I mean, to get into process design and being able to see how they all map out, it's all interweaved. Chad, and then in terms of collective impact, I mean, it's all about making that third phase, using that theory of collective impact around a shared measurement system, creating a backbone organization, all of those things in order to collectively make an impact, right? That's a lot in phase 3. So that's kind of how it's mapped out at a high level. Chad, is there something that you would add, given the time that we have?
No, that was great. That was great. Yeah.
Okay, well, do we have time
Another
for one more?
Tyler?
Sure. So Mike Klassen?
Yeah, we have 4 minutes, I guess.
Hello, Mike.
Yeah, hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Wonderful. This is interaction. I'm really interested in just hearing you guys comment a little bit on kind of what's been working for you in terms of like the identity of the Sustainability Transitions Lab, both in terms of its affiliation with the Natural Step as in a single organization and its funding sources. And I guess the question's coming from, I've been working with a group of graduate students at University of Waterloo researching change labs in the Canadian context, and there's a great article that Jeff Mulgan from Nesta put out earlier this year talking about the radical's dilemma and the tension between, you know, being outside a system influencing change versus being firmly inside, and the pros and cons. And I just wonder, you know, what have you guys been experiencing in terms of where, yeah, basically the relationship between the identity of the lab and your credibility in moving forward change processes when you might be considered an outside actor.
Thanks. That's a great question too. Holy smokes. I think a couple of things that I'll just toss in here. One is that Sarah Lynn alluded to this earlier. We are really trying to take the approach and to practice the idea of putting the issue in the middle and or issue in the center of the way we work. And I think it's well framed by Sarah Lynn as a practice because it's not easy sometimes, and we all work, you know, to some degree probably within organizations and on programs that have their own brand and so on. And so I think the key point in terms of the identity is trying to put the issue in the middle. And so we have, you know, process design here, competency and experience, and it's always evolving and so on, that we can bring to an issue and to partners and so on. But we're really trying to be doing so in the spirit of service. You know, what serves the issue best. And the good thing about being still fairly early stage in design process and experimentation is that we can be really, and almost have to be really, you know, totally open to emergence and adaptation and so on. So practically, you know, just to answer your question a little more practically there, at this point, we are not as concerned with the identity of the Sustainability Transition Lab as we are with the lessons learned about how to make an impact as we work on this. And so just one, you know, specific manifestation of that is the project that we're doing in conjunction with the Evergreen CityWorks group on housing in the Greater Toronto area, which is, you know, just in its first phase now, is not called the Sustainability Transition Lab. It's called the Housing Action Lab, and you know, it really is, you know, Evergreen CityWorks is the convener around that issue, and they are convening that group of 40 some odd people and organizations that really care about that issue. And so in that sense, the Sustainability Transition Lab identity is, the process, is being used to design the process, but it's not front and center in terms of identity. So whether that's a good strategy or not, I don't know, but that's the strategy we're using, or the way we're approaching it right now. And in terms of the funding side of it, we're also have been fortunate to have the McConnell Foundation as to help us basically have resources to bring to some of these projects that then our partners can match through contributions that they bring. And that's of course not always going to be the case, and neither for us or for other groups in this work, but that's allowed us in the early stages of experimentation and development to really focus on the issues and so on in the process. But we ultimately, these processes need to have sustainable so-called business models as well. That and I think we're learning a lot there that will, and I'm sure the rest of the others in the field are learning a lot about that too. And there are lots of different ways that can that can unfold. It doesn't always have to be a one or two larger foundations that invest in a project, or governments that invest in a project. But I guess the real key is having an issue that is messy and is topical and is burning in a sense. That there are enough people who really care about seeing that issue resolved, that that you're going to attract the participation and resources and so on. And that's kind of really where the focus should be, I think.
I think that what I'd also add to that is the underlayer of it. So that's a lot of the external part of the identity, but there's also the internal form of the identity of how that plays out in terms of designing the process with Evergreen, for example, to go off with Chad's example. And so it's also not, this is our process and we're sticking to every single word and P's and Q's within our process design. It's also internally, you fight with identity of, is this like, where is this based on and what does this mean? But it's taking the Sustainability Transition Lab as a standard or a starting place, and then customizing that design based on the issue, based on the situation, based on the co-convener, things along those lines. So there's the external identity, and then there's also, I'm calling it the internal identity of what you share with your co-convener, right? And you have branding issues in there. You have conversations about how much of this part of the STL process do you take, and so on and so forth, right? They're really neat conversations. And it is within that messiness that you have to always stick to having the issue at the center, not just TNS, but also the co-convener, right? That it's playing that out. Chad, what else did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just was going to reinforce one point, which is just your observation at the end there that we are, in many cases, an outsider to the system. I think that's how you said it, and I think that's really that's right and really insightful. And it's for that reason that our approach generally is, and I'm sure it is for others as well, that we are working with partners who are in the system, and that's the ideal collaboration in the process design and project development for us. So the Evergreen CityWorks is a good example. They're in the system and they're convening that system, and other cases as well. So that's how we can be both an insider and an outsider.
That was good, Chad. So I think that we're, yeah, I'm noticing that we're over time. So thanks, guys, for sticking with us. Yeah, I guess we're 5 minutes over, guys, eh? Sorry. That's it. That's it. That's all. So I hope this has sparked a lot of questions for you and a lot of insights for you. I hope that it's added value to how you're seeing sustainability-driven collaboration. and keep in touch. I think that this is probably a great bridge to say if you have questions or insights or anything, Chad and I will both be at Accelerate on June 5th and 6th in Toronto. We love riffing on this stuff, and that's a great place to be able to debate some of this, get into the grueling minutia of some of this, and have some other pretty smart minds in the room to be able to turn this stuff over. And with that, we'll sign off. Anything else from you, Chad, or from you, Tyler? Does that sound good?
No, except that we'll be sending out
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the slides and the presentation on YouTube.
Great. Perfect. Yep. I've handed those over to you, so you guys will have that. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for your time. I hope that this was useful for you. Thanks, all. Bye now.